Good morning. This is Eric Rollins, the Constitutionalist, here on 1550 KXEX, the best talk in town. The discussion I'm having today with my guest, Ruth Weiss, I think is an important one. I see our voting rights and our vote as something that is sacred and important, and really it's the most important aspect, or at least one of the most important aspects of our First Amendment rights, from my perspective. And having free and fair elections should be something that everybody wants. And today, I'm talking to somebody that represents EIP California, and I believe is actually a warrior for freedom, for free and fair elections. She works tirelessly. My guest, Ruth, welcome.
Thank you so much, Eric. Great to be here.
So, what are the goals of EIP California? And that stands for Election Integrity Project California.
Correct. Election Integrity Project California. Well, our purpose statement is that our goal is to defend the civil rights of all California citizens to participate fully in the election process as guaranteed to them in the U.S. and the California constitutions. And that adds up to a great deal more than just casting a vote. It adds up to being part of the process, having input, being able to observe all the way from the beginning to the end, to be, another set of eyes and ears, to be quality control. It involves all of that. And so we do everything we can to inform people about what their rights are, what their privileges are, what their responsibilities are according to the law. We try to facilitate their ability to participate more and more fully as they desire to. We try to educate people through the things that we publish for the email list of people who have asked to receive our emails, and we sometimes file lawsuits if we need to protect those civil rights. And then we, of course, have a really good observer training program so that those who would like to step up and actually be trained as official observers have that opportunity in each election cycle. And our motto is basically to make sure that every vote that is cast lawfully and then accurately counted. That's what we do.
Well, that's a mouthful. That's a big job. Are you in all 58 counties?
We are, we represent all 58 counties. We have teams in fewer than that at this point. At our height, before things kind of fell apart because of a mass immigration out of California, so we lost a few of our teams that way, and then 2020 and the COVID thing kind of made things difficult for us. But at our height, we had teams in 45 of the 58 counties, and representing at least 85% of the populace.
Wow. Well, that's an important thing. You mentioned a training program. I know several friends that have been through this training program and have only had really good things to say, and that they participated with you. That training program essentially teaches people what to look for when they observe the counting of the ballots, or anything at the Register of Voters office that has to do with processing the ballots. Is that correct?
That is correct. That we have two separate trainings, and one is to do exactly that. The other one is to train them what to look for and what to do about problems at the polling locations when with people casting their voting purpose.
Well, that's really important work. Now, how if somebody was interested in doing that, because this is another way you can get involved. Not everybody wants to be a spokesman and be the tip of the spear, but you could go watch what happens at a polling place or go to the counting center. Most counties have a counting center. I'm more familiar with what mine has. I assume probably all of them do, but there's some pretty small counties that maybe it could take place at the same polling place.
To my knowledge, they all count their ballots at a central location in the county.
Okay,
All 58.
So then there would be a potential chain of custody issue if you're transporting them.
Yes, and that's part of what we ask people to look for. We ask them to follow the vehicles that are transporting to ensure that there are at least two people for a two-person chain of custody, to make sure they don't stop off somewhere around between point A and point B. So there's a lot that people can do.
Wait,
Um, this, Go
people
ahead.
might actually stop off and get more ballots and be dishonest? And I
Well,
know,
we've never seen.
I know you have to be careful with that, but I want people to think about that. All of these
We've never seen it happen yet
vulnerabilities.
in California. Yes. Toss a few out, or just maybe it's something as innocent as stopping off to get something to eat and leaving the car vulnerable, and somebody else could break into the car and grab the ballots. You never know what can happen. So we want to keep our eye on that for the protection of the ballots and the protection of the people who are transporting.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of vulnerabilities in our system. And it really bothers me that we used the COVID emergency to essentially gut any real checks and balances to make sure that your ballots are safe and fair. You want to talk about some of the things that happened during COVID, because I know you're involved in a lawsuit along these lines. And
Absolutely, it's disturbing. We know by looking at the way that the legislation was trending all the way from say 20 to 25 years ago. Uh, it's very clear that there was an agenda, and that agenda was to slowly tighten and noose and make sure that less and less integrity was happening, that people were distanced further away from their own election process, that it got sloppier and much more manipulatable. There's no question that that's what all these laws have added up to, but they're all passed through the argument of, oh, we're going to make everything more accessible. We're going to make sure that more people can vote, and of course that's a great thing. But you don't want to surrender the integrity of the electoral process um, for that. There's a happy medium that you can reach, but when you make it as accessible as it is right now, which means ballots flying everywhere with no security of who gets them or who is supposed to get them or who casts them and who returns them, and I mean you have such a problem, and that agenda was able to leap forward maybe 10 to 20 years in advance of where it could have otherwise gotten when COVID hit, because now they had COVID as an excuse to close a lot of the polls, to consolidate the polls that were there, to make it uncomfortable to vote in person because you had to go to a further place, you had to wear a silly mask, you had to do all these things. And then on top of that, stuffing a vote by mail ballot into every single mailbox. People were confused. A lot of people assumed that was the only way left for them to vote.
yep,
A lot of people just sort of said, oh, well, okay, I'll fill it out. A lot of the hype telling them that it wasn't safe to open their door and go put the ballot even in their own mailbox. And so that enhanced the ability of ballot harvesters to do the damage that they do. So COVID really advanced that agenda tremendously. And then because that election was a really energetic election, I mean, I don't think we've had one with that much energy and contention in our history. And so obviously the turnout was going to be intensely high, and it was.
right.
But the legislature then said, oh, the turnout was because we sent everybody a ballot. So obviously we have to keep doing that. So they took the opportunity then to make that a permanent situation.
Well, I want to point out that in the very next election, after this election you're referring to, there were about 2 million less Republicans that bothered to vote. Hmm.
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 And
So,
overall, that it was down because it just wasn't that exciting an election. When you compare election A and election B, you can't do that because of the variables of how important the election is to people or how contentious it is, and so that they are completely ignoring the fact that participation went way down, even though they were still sending out the ballots. They're still sticking to their story from 2020.
can we talk a little bit about the vulnerabilities of ballot harvesting? I mean, it turned voting into the Wild West because anything could happen.
Yes, it did. because the ballot harvesting, the way it's done in California, there are no controls. So anybody, and we know a large number of people who are not even citizens, were paid to go out and scour Skid Row and places like that to get ballots from people.
Well, how would they get those ballots? Wouldn't they have to pay for them or offer something?
Well, that's exactly what they did, and they were even prosecuted for it. So I'm just not, giving anecdotes here. In Los Angeles, they had a two-pronged approach. They went out first and got all these people to sign a registration affidavit, and then had the ballot itself mailed to a mail address that organization then would collect. Then they would fill out those ballots, take them back down to those people, and simply have the ballot already made out and sealed and say, here, just sign this. And then they would give them, whatever, a certificate to McDonald's or wherever it took for the people to say, yeah, I'll do that.
So they
And
were caught.
they were caught, they were prosecuted. So we know that it happened. And the number of times and places that it happened that nobody caught it, I'm sure you can imagine. So people, but it's worse than that. Organizations, because they said you can pay ballot harvesters. You just can't pay them per ballot, but you can pay them per day, per hour, any way you want to pay them. And
in any
so
amount you want?
In any amount. There are no restrictions. So you can go out, you can knock on doors, you can either offer people a carrot or a stick, because who's going to know? You can sort of coerce your way in. People who will say, well, I'm not going to really vote, I don't know much about it. Oh, well, I'll help you fill out the ballot. A lot of people are very naive. And so it just opened the doors to anything and everything.
Well, there's vulnerable populations that would be pretty easily manipulated. What about, senior citizen homes? What about people where English is a second language and they're a new immigrant?
You hit the nail right on the head. Since 2012, we have identified several vulnerable populations, and you just named two of them: the people who are non-citizens, the people who are in some sort of a facility or assisted living kind of thing, students, college students, in particularly those in dorms, highly, highly vulnerable to manipulation, and every law that they're passing is just allowing these vulnerable populations to be more and more targeted.
See, I want everybody to vote if they bother to become educated.
Correct.
Not necessarily in a way where they'd agree with me, but I want them to research issues, research candidates, and the thought that somebody could come in, fill their ballot out for them, have them just sign it and pay them off. Wow. That's terrifying.
Yeah, and it's nothing new. I mean, that's been happening across the nation for decades. We know that. But California is kind of enhancing the ability for that to happen, beneath the radar by the laws they're passing. As a matter of fact, we have a document on our website I would invite people to go and download and look at. It's called the Golden State Agenda, and it's just a bullet point chronological view of the major laws that have been passed since around 2000 in California that have added up to the situation in which we find ourselves now. And I think it might very, very well illuminate the problem if people will take a look at that and say, wow, really? And then if people will get on our email list, because we are keeping track of the new laws that they are passing right now, and there's some incredible doozies out there right now that are just tying a bow on they're actually restricting voters from having the voice they want to have, while at the same time finding better and less detectable ways of voter manipulation. So all of that is on our website. It is eip-ca.com. And it's real easy just to sign up to get our emails and alerts. We really appreciate people doing that and then sending that information out to others that they think would also benefit from hearing it.
Well, that's really a big deal. It is scary to me that there's all these vulnerabilities. Without naming names, California has one party rule, which I believe corrupts. And I believe we've reached a point of huge corruption. Folks, you can figure out which party rules that. We don't even need to name them.
And we've reached absolute power, so there we have absolute corruption, as the saying goes.
Yep.
You were mentioning the evils of ballot harvesting. Let me tell you that Arizona a few years ago passed an anti-ballot harvesting law, and it was immediately challenged, and they took it to court, and it made its way all the way up to the Supreme Court for a ruling as to whether Arizona or any state had the right to ban ballot harvesting in its state. Um, there should be no question about that, but they were challenged all the way to the top court. In the meantime, California had instituted ballot harvesting, and we saw the devastation in 2018 when it was utilized for the first time. And EIPCA was there to document everything. So we worked with Landmark Legal Foundation attorney and created a what's called a friend of the court brief, or an amicus brief, stating all the documentation that we had as to why ballot harvesting is damaging and that every state should have the right to ban it if they want to. And we filed that along with the Arizona lawsuit on the side of Arizona. It was one of the very few amicus briefs that was accepted, entered into the congressional record, and it was primarily due to what we could contribute to the evidence that allowed the Supreme Court to come to a 6-3 decision that Arizona had every right to ban ballot harvesting. Not only that, their ruling said that every other state should have a similar law because it's clear that ballot harvesting is damaging to election integrity. So that was, we didn't do anything for California, but our California experience was able to help Arizona and any other state that wants to go in that direction, and that was a big victory.
Well, so you helped stop essentially the way California goes, they talk about as the way the nation goes. And
Yes.
a Californian, your organization was able to help stop the spread of that disease. That's what I consider ballot harvesting, is kind of a disease because it does not promote free and fair elections where legal voters, legal registered voters' rights are taken care of, because anybody that is a nefarious player could get a ballot, whether they're legal or not. There's lots of ways around it. And I wish that there was more prosecution, but there seems to be no will because we're ruled by one party. They just want power.
And I just think people were incredibly shocked when they watched the 2000 Mules movie. And yet everything you were seeing in that movie was legal in California. You didn't have to go in the middle of the night and sneak ballots into a drop box, because you could go in the bright of day and take as many ballots as you could carry and slide them into the box, and there was nothing illegal about that because they were simply harvested ballot. You can turn anybody's in. There's no control. There's no sign-in. There's no trade-off of chain of custody. There's nothing. So just thinking about that as being legal in California, it should frighten you even more.
Mm-hmm. I personally have taken ballots down to the Register of Voters office, mostly for family, but other people have asked me, well, they're going to mail it. I'm like, no, let me take it directly and hand it to a clerk so that less hands touch these ballots. The more hands that touch them, the less we know about the chain of custody, the more opportunity for a problem.
You are right. If you cannot convince people to go out and actually cast their vote in person, then keep them from mailing it. And I would say keep them from putting it in a drop box too, because California now has these regulations with the drop boxes that they have to be out all along the streets and everywhere. They have to be open 24/7. They're not surveilled in any way, shape, or form, so they're not protected. The ballots can stay in there for up to 96 hours before they have to be emptied. So they're sitting there vulnerable to vandalism or whatever for that period of time. So the drop boxes are not as secure as we would like to believe, and then we have no control over the way in which the ballots are handled when they're taken out of the drop boxes. And we have seen videos that people took of people removing the ballots from those boxes and really manhandling them, crinkling them, getting them to the position where once they get to the registrar's office for processing, they're going to be damaged ballots. And a damaged ballot has to be duplicated, which is another place where,
Adjudication, right?
no. This is duplication. They take a
Just
ballot and they copy it over
well, let's hope
onto
they don't make a mistake then.
exactly. It's another spot where somebody could unintentionally or intentionally manipulate what's on a ballot. And so, anything you can do to protect your ballot from any of those stations, as you say, adjudication, but also the duplication, all of that, it's better to turn your ballot in person at a polling location, and hopefully without the envelope.
Well, see, I don't even
Yeah,
do the polling location. I literally go to the Register of Voters office and hand it to a clerk right there at the office. It'll still have to
right.
go from her
But what
hands.
I'm saying is that the goal, and what we could keep trying to inform people of, is the goal is to not use the envelope. Because as long as you use the envelope, it goes through all of that processing. And all kinds of things could happen. Whereas if you turn it in without the envelope, you're turning in a naked ballot, it comes out of the box and into the tabular, and boom, you're done. And so there's none of that other vulnerability that takes place with a ballot that's coming in an envelope.
So it
So that's
eliminates
why we
possible cheating in a lot of ways.
exactly.
Or even just
So
mistakes.
and mistakes, absolutely. It's human error, it's machine error, and it's intentionality, and you just want to eliminate as much of that as you possibly can. So if you go to a polling location or your registrar's office and vote in person, which means you have to do it after the date that the polls open in your county, for that to happen at the registrar's office. And now there's another bill that appears to be going through and going to pass. It's already available in several counties, but now this would make it available in all counties, that you can go to a polling location with your vote by mail ballot without the envelope. You can fill out that ballot and use it as your paper ballot. You just check in and then you put that ballot into the box. It gets counted that day, no envelope. The benefit to that is that in some counties, if you go to work to vote at the polls, your only option is to vote on the machine or the ballot marking device. They don't have paper ballots anymore. And those of us that are old school and saying, the simplest way is the safest way, and that is with a paper ballot that has not gone through a machine, that does not have a QR code printed on it. And so the ability to use the ballot they mailed you as a naked paper ballot at the polls without an envelope is now something that by 2024, we believe the whole state is going to have that right. I think that law is going to pass this year.
I hope so.
That's what we encourage.
We're going to go ahead and take a brief break. This is Eric Rollins, the Constitutionalist, here on 1550 KXEX, the best talk in town. I want to say thank you to my social media audience. We're new on Rumble, we're on Truth Social, we're on Twitter, we're on Facebook. Like, subscribe, comment, all of those things, share. All of those things help if you believe in this message. We're going to go ahead and come back. This is Eric Rollins, the Constitutionalist, here on 1550 KXEX, the best talk in town. And I am joined today by what I consider to be a woman that is a warrior for freedom, Ruth Weiss from Election Integrity Project, California. Welcome.
Thank you again.
So, we didn't even address the fact that, actually, I want to talk a little bit about some of the lawsuits that you're in. I know sometimes you can say things and sometimes you can't, but I'm particularly curious about the one that includes Fresno County. That one happened in 2020. Where are we at?
Right. That is our federal lawsuit. We are challenging a 20-plus California election laws on a constitutional basis. We are saying that those laws keep us from the right that we have through the Constitution for various protections that allow us to select our leaders in a fair, honest, and transparent way. And so we're not asking for any elections to be overturned. We're not changing the past. We're using the evidence from the past to prove that future elections, if held under the same laws, will continue to be, unfair and not honest and certainly not transparent. And so it is a very landmark thing. I mean, nothing like this has ever been done in the history of the United States. So it is a very big, groundbreaking sort of lawsuit. There are 15 counties that we have specifically named. We could have named all 58, but that just becomes expensive and whatever. So we picked the 15 counties, of which Fresno is one, and we have selected areas of the Constitution to say these laws violate these areas of the Constitution. The first thing that happened was that we were challenged by the defendants on the basis of standing, which means you don't have the legal right to file this particular lawsuit. Standing means you can prove that you have been harmed. If you personally have not been harmed, then you can't file a lawsuit. And so all of those suits that were filed after the 2020 election were thrown out on the basis of standing. And so nothing really went through. Ours is different. We prevailed at the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. They ruled in our favor that we do have standing to file this lawsuit. So now it's been remanded back to the district court. The defendants have filed one more challenge against the lawsuit, which we can't imagine will stand because the Ninth Circuit has already ruled on it. So as soon as the judge rules on this second challenge, then the next phase of the lawsuit will be discovery. And that can be extremely lengthy because each side gets to ask the other side to produce documents and other things, everything that they want. Our intention is to ask for things like policies and procedures, hardware and software machines, the signatures on the envelopes so that we can sort of get a feel for whether the signature verification process is in any way, shape, or form legitimate. We're going to look at duplicated ballots to see whether the duplication process is happening with any kind of integrity. So those kinds of things are what we would be asking for in discovery, and they can ask for anything from us that they want to try to discredit us or who knows what. It's very important that we are a nonpartisan organization. A partisan suit like this would never fly. But we are nonpartisan. We are a 501c3, and so we never go after anything from a partisan perspective. We're going after to protect each and every voter out there. So it's going to be a lengthy process and an expensive process. The actual complaint, where you can read what we're saying, what laws we're challenging, what areas of the Constitution we're using, what some of the evidence we're using, is all in the complaint, and it's posted on our website. You can simply go there and download it and take a look at it and become familiar with this lawsuit that's going to be very important not only to Californians but ultimately to the entire nation.
So not only could you go through a training, not only could you become connected with you through an email, but you guys need money to persevere in these lawsuits because they're expensive. So how would somebody donate to EIP California?
You can donate through the website, again at eip-ca.com. And if you prefer to send in a check, you just hit the donate button and you will get an address that you can mail a check to if you prefer it that way rather than online. We appreciate donations, large and small. We appreciate people letting us know of organizations and businesses that support efforts like ours, or give grants so that we can pursue those, because we're going to have to raise at least $2 million to get through this lawsuit. And that's not easy to do for an all-volunteer organization that has no big financial backing of any kind. But we're trusting in the Lord to guide us through, and everybody out there who becomes aware of what we're doing and the importance of it, will everybody give a little and we will be in good shape.
And by the way, is it a tax write-off? Because you mentioned 501c3.
You betcha. Anything you give to EIPCA is a complete tax write-off, and also understand that no one in this organization takes a penny for what we do, never have. So every penny that you donate goes directly to the work and keeping the business afloat.
I'm going to change gears slightly. What do you think of what happened in Shasta County where they went to paper ballots?
Well, we believe that paper ballots, same day voting, and hand counting is the only way to get back to full election integrity. So I know that Shasta was very measured and careful in what they did. They did a lot of research. They brought in organizations that had done hand counting, that do hand counting now, that know how it works, that have a system. They brought in the handbooks on how it works. They proved that it would be doable, that the results would come much more quickly than the way we're doing it now, that they could do it much less expensively than with the machine. So they were able to bring all that evidence to bear. And the machine companies came and they had their little sales pitch as well. And at the end of the entire process, the Board of Supervisors decided that they would eliminate the machines, because the goal is to give the people back the confidence in their electoral process that we have lost. Polls across the nation right now are showing 70 to 80% of the people don't trust the election process and the results. So that means we need to do something to return that trust. And I think the machines create a lot of the distrust. So Shasta County was very bold, but also very careful about the way they did it. So they were all set to go. But what you may not be aware of is that the legislature is now exploding an atomic bomb that will destroy what Shasta did and make it impossible for any other county to follow suit. They have a bill that's rushing through the process now. It's declared an urgency bill, which means it takes effect immediately when the governor signs it. It's called AB Assembly Bill 969. It's been amended twice. At first, it was troublesome, but still okay. It started out saying no county can cancel its contract with an election system unless they have another plan in place. Well, Shasta didn't have a plan in place. They had a plan to find a plan in place. So what they wanted is the plan in place first. Well, that was okay. But then they amended the bill to say without a contract with another company signed. So that eliminated the ability of any county to go to hand counting the way that Shasta decided to do. And this last amendment is horrific. It says Shasta can't do what it's doing. It basically says no county in California can hold their elections without a machine involvement. They have to have a machine system in place and a contract in place. That the Secretary of State gets to do all this determination. That says no district that has more than 1,000 voters can do any kind of a hand count type of election. So it's basically going to take all that autonomy away from Shasta. They're going to have to go back to find a company that they want to sign a contract with, and no other county will be able to rise to the occasion and do what Shasta did. So it's a despicable bill. It is simply draconian and saying, the state is going to take full and total power, and we are not going to let you guys decide what's fair, honest, and transparent in terms of your elections. Even though the state gives the counties a lot of autonomy in the way that they handle their elections, they're not willing to do it with this. So we want people to contact their state senators, but because this bill is now going through the Senate, it's already passed the Assembly. It's going through the Senate. So they need to contact their state senators and say, don't pass this bill. They can go to our website. Probably starting tomorrow, they can read our third letter of objection, because we put up a letter every time it's amended. So I just finished that letter last night. It'll be up on our website in a day or two, and they need to learn what this bill does, and then they need to create a huge amount of uproar. They need to do emails, they need to do text messages, they need to send letters, they need to visit their senators in person when they're at home, and just logically and in an educated way explain why this is just a bridge too far and the legislature should not take it. So we're hoping that people will rise to the occasion and try to get this bill basically killed in the Senate.
So it's another case of the state knows better rather than local people making local decisions. I get that there's a balance between the federal and the state and local governments, but our state consistently votes to take more control from the people. And it's one party
Yeah.
that's doing that.
And our letter is rather pointed this time to say, look, it's obvious that this is a desperation move, which implies that maybe you're about to lose something very valuable to you, and that is the ability to control our electoral results. And you know that you've got that ability now, and you're not going to let any county take that away from you. I mean, it's horrible to be thinking that way, but that is the only reason for this kind of uh, hugely power overreach kind of law. Because in every other area of the election process, the state is very permissive. They'll just give you a broad scaffolding of what has to happen and leave it up to the counties to determine how to implement these things. So to then come in and say, well, here's the one area we're not going to let you have any say in it's telling, it's suspicious.
It is highly suspicious. And the fact that they insist that you have to use a machine. Did I catch that right?
Yes.
Rather than whatever you
must
believe.
have a contract with an election system that is approved by Secretary of State. So that would be, I think there are 3 that are allowable in California.
Highly suspicious.
Yes.
Makes me really worry. Folks, we need to take this seriously. One of the other big...
Read the bill. It'll scare you to death. AB 969. Just look up the text of the amended bill, and it really will scare you.
Well, that is terrifying. The ongoing issue, and I know that EIP had a big win in California, in Southern California, in LA County a couple times, is
correct,
where you wanted them to clean the voter rolls, and the register of voter was essentially ignoring that. And magically, a lot of those people that were not eligible to vote seem to magically vote. Don't know quite how that happened. I know that happens in my county. I'm also pretty familiar with Dr. Douglas Frank, and there's a team that is working on that aspect of election integrity because there's multiple aspects. But talk about the wins that you had in LA removing ineligible voters, and they can be an ineligible. Go ahead and define those categories.
Thank you. Yes, if a voter has not voted in 2 successive national elections, federal elections, the county is supposed to send them a postcard to say, we notice you've been inactive. Are you still around? Do you still want to be registered? And they have every right to stay registered and neglect to vote from time to time. That's fine, but they have to reach out because inactivity is one possibility that they may have moved, that they may have become too ill to vote, or that they may have passed away. So if the card does not come back, or if it comes back undeliverable, then the county is supposed to move that voter registration from the active list to the inactive list. This is by federal mandate. This is the Help America Vote Act and the 1993 National Voter Registration Act that mandates this. And then the people on the inactive list are eligible to vote as long as they're staying on that list, but they will have to reactivate their registration to do that. And the only way they do that is to ask for a ballot or show up to vote, but they are not public facing, so that they would not be given out as names for the parties or candidates to send stuff to. They would not be mailed a ballot. They're on the inactive list. And they have to stay on the inactive list for another 2 successive federal election cycles. So after 8 years, they can finally remove you from the voter rolls. Well, what was happening all across California, but we selected Los Angeles because they're a third of the voters of the state, and they were one of the most egregious in terms of voter roll maintenance. And we said, no, you've got 1.5, 1.6 million people on your active list who are already eligible and designated to be moved to the inactive and you haven't moved them. Well, understand when you have a state like California that doesn't require any voter ID, anyone can go to the polls with the name of one of those people and vote in their name by simply claiming to be that person, and no one can challenge you. So it's a real vulnerability, and we want them off the rolls for that reason.
I have a
So
question then.
yeah. Mhm.
If is there a way for, say, just the average citizen to look up whether somebody's on the active or inactive roll?
Yes, you can qualify to purchase the voter rolls by being under the auspices of research, education, or partisan activity. Probably the best way for a normal person to do it would be to go to someone who is running or recently ran for office, or to their county party group, and because those groups definitely have the voter rolls, and just say, can I find out if so and so is on the list? If you know an individual's name, birth date, and address, you can go online at your county registrar's office website and find out whether they're still on the voter rolls too.
So if you were in the inactive list, would you have a ballot mailed to you?
No, the inactive, and that was another win that we had in fighting that legislation when it came about in 2020 that they were going to mail everybody a ballot. We said, well, at least you need to amend this bill to say that it clearly cannot send to people on the inactive list, because Nevada had just passed a similar law, and the biggest county in Nevada actually sent ballots to both the active and the inactive people in their county. It was devastating. So we argued, because the legislature said, oh, no, that would never happen. We said, yes, it would, and we want it specifically stated that this does not include inactive voters. So they did make that amendment. That was a big win for us, because it potentially saved 4.5 million ballots from being mailed out to inactive voters.
So not only
So
did it
that was,
save money, but it also meant that there was less possibility of cheating. We're going to
yeah,
go
by
ahead and
4.5 million people. Okay. So in 2017, we did file a lawsuit against Los Angeles for not cleaning their voter rolls. We did prevail in a settlement at the beginning of 2019. They instantly removed those 1.6 million that were qualified to be removed, and then they had to mail those verification cards out to another 1.5 million to start the process. And then they've had to report to us every year between then and now and beyond. They have to continue to do that process. And so each year they've removed somewhere between 1.2 and 1.5 million people. So it was a great start. It also required the Secretary of State to update the manual that they used to train all of the registrars in the state.
let's go ahead and take a break.
Yeah.
Just to make it all work. So we're going to take a break. This is Eric Rollins, the Constitutionalist, here on 1550 KXEX, the best talk in town. For my final segment, I'll absolutely let you finish your point, but I would also like to focus on hopeful things, and then when we get right down to it, I will want you to repeat contact information for your organization. Let's go ahead and come back, Jeremy. This is Eric Rollins, the Constitutionalist, here on 1550 KXEX, the best talk in town. I am talking with Ruth Weiss of EIP California, and we're talking about ways to ensure election integrity. Free and fair elections should be wanted by everyone. Welcome, Ruth. You were making a point. You want to go ahead and finish that, or?
Yes, just that because of that lawsuit, California is now doing better, especially in certain places on their voter roll maintenance, because the Secretary of State had to retrain the registrars in the proper way to maintain their voter rolls, and that has helped. There's still huge problems, and especially in Los Angeles, because we're finding people get removed, and then 3 or 4 months later they're reappearing on the voter roll. So that did not completely resolve the issue, but it was a step in the right direction. It was definitely a win of a battle. We still have to win the war. Voter roll maintenance is extremely difficult, and it's a constant topic across the nation, right, and especially in California. So that was another big win. So you said you wanted to talk about wins. That was a great win. The Arizona thing was a great win. Our prevailing at the Ninth Circuit recently was a very big win. And then we believe the lawsuit we're currently doing in Ventura County, because they have been violating observer rights rather aggressively. And so we believe that we will prevail in this lawsuit as well, which will clarify and solidify observer rights throughout the state. And then we eventually really expect to come out victorious in our federal lawsuit we discussed earlier.
So that's the one before the Ninth Circuit.
That's the one that
is
now back the federal.
It's now court, been batted back down, and the next step, if it makes it through that step, is up to the Ninth Circuit.
No. The Ninth Circuit is a court of appeals, so the next step is discovery. We're actually going to hold the trial. We're actually going to do the audits and things like that, and then wind up. But what we do believe is that whichever side prevails at this level, it will be then appealed up through the appellate situation until it gets to the Supreme Court. But that's a long ways away.
That's the hard part. When you're trying to resolve these issues through lawsuits, it takes time and money. There's no instant. Yes. It is much easier to pick candidates that believe in election integrity, that are candidates of integrity. And I'm not even going to mention party, but pick people that they want to protect your rights. They see themselves as servants. And regardless of party, I think we would have a better country if we did those. And it all starts local. You got to fix yourself. You got to pick the right people.
There's an enormous philosophical divide, I think, in this country too that comes into play here. There are the people who say count every vote, and then there are the people who say count every legitimate lawful vote. And there's an enormous difference between those two. That everybody should get to vote versus every citizen should get to vote. So you've got this real philosophical divide here on what this democratic process really should be, and each side believes it's right. And then there's a side that's saying no impediments whatsoever. People should be able to vote, in any way, shape, or form that they want to, and no restrictions and no limitations. And then the other side that's saying let's put up enough safeguards so that the process can still have integrity. And there doesn't seem to be any middle ground between those two groups. So it's very frightening when you think about the direction that the arguments have gone.
Well, one side wants power no matter what. I mean, think about that. You want power no matter what. No rules. This is the Wild West. And we're going to, for instance, open the border, let people come across, and then because we view it as everybody should vote, those votes should count. Well, we're a constitutional republic. Mm-hmm. We have a whole lot of our rights defined, or actually our government's rights defined, and the people's rights is more open. Our Constitution was written in a brilliant way in that it limited the powers of government. We need to get back to that so that we're all treated fairly and equally. We're down to about 2 minutes, so just so you know.
Well, look at the number of countries around the world that hold elections, but they're clearly not elections. They're just a dog and pony show so the people have something to do, and then somebody gets elected by 97%. It looks as if we're heading that direction. People are starting to talk about the fact we no longer have elections, we have selections. And I think you mentioned Dr. Frank. His work is very much elucidating that fact. We need to work together. We need to get back to our constitutional foundation in this country. That's what has worked for over 200 years. That's what we need to get back to before we completely crumble. And EIPCA has been in the trenches since the end of 2010, working to see that happens in California.
Well,
our website, I can repeat that, is eip-ca.com. And there you can sign up to receive our emails, get all of incredible information there, and also, of course, donate if you choose.
And you can go through their trainings and get involved for the next election. How soon do people need to do that? Because I know you have a cutoff. You want people fully trained a certain amount of time before the election.
Right. We haven't set those dates yet. We will be keeping that information out to people, which is one reason why they should sign up for our emails.
Okay. Well, this has been a good conversation. Final thoughts. We're down to about 30 seconds.
Pray for us. Pray for, because this battle is partly in the spiritual realm. We know that, we feel it every day, and so if we can be covered with prayer for all of our attorneys, for the judges, for people on both sides, that that the right thing will be done, and that the right words will come out of our mouths, and that somehow this country can be redeemed back to the way that the Lord helped us to establish in the first place.
Well, we were the most successful country in the world, and the beacon of light for the world with this system, and I don't understand why others want to tear it down.
Amen.
I think we're about ready for the... This is Eric Rollins, the Constitutionalist, here on 1550 KXEX, the best talk in town. So, we've got just a moment for the social media crowd. Let's go ahead and give your contact information one more time, because my people know that at the very end I always do that so that they can find it without having to zip through the whole video. They can just go to the end and here's the contact information.
Okay, we are Election Integrity Project California. You can put that in your search engine, or our initials, EIP, and then there's a hyphen there, CA.com.
Well, Ruth, I thank you for sharing this time. I thank you for all the tireless work you do, and every volunteer at your organization. I'm friends with a lot of them. Because I'm on the radio, I'm a little more controversial, and I'm not always this nice to people that don't, from my perspective, don't believe in freedom. Generally, those people are on the left, though not always. There are some leftists that, the old school leftists, believe in free speech and believe in freedom. Those people I can potentially be, classic liberal, I can be friends with. The people that believe in authoritarianism, not at all. So I thank you for spending this time. I thank you for stepping up. I think, final thoughts?
I think I've given them. Just continue to pray for this country, pray for EIPCA, and educate yourself. Use our website, educate yourself, get involved in the process of legislation, so we don't fall further off the cliff here in California.
Absolutely, and we need to work on AB 969 and call your state senator.
Yes.
Well, Ruth, I thank you for this time today.